And welcome back. Here we are again to episode 2 of the Big Gay Overalls podcast. Firstly, want to give a massive thank you and shout out to everyone who found, because I didn't really promote the first episode, but found it, watched it, listened to it, downloaded it, subscribed. Super grateful. Thank you very much. And I hope that you found the content valuable or entertaining, or at the least some food for thought, which is the goal. This is episode 2. I'm gonna try and get these out weekly, and I really need to keep myself to task on that. I did receive some amazing comments from people who did listen and that they appreciated the content, what I had to say. So let's keep rolling with that. As I said, I'm more than happy to share this space and have people come on as guests rather than me just banging on all the time, but also just being able to connect with people and help you share your stories as well, particularly people who maybe are or have been in the same space that I was. So super excited with that. Today, I thought I'd talk about some of the thoughts that I had and some of the concepts around feeling broken, like during that time, and even before I, came out and, made decisions, changed my relationships and all that sort of thing. That for many years I did in fact feel like there was something wrong with me and that I was broken or I was defective. The way I used to describe myself to people is, and I'm glad he's come back in fashion now, I guess, or the TV shows got popular again, is Dexter, because quite often people didn't understand the reference. But so Dexter is a psychopath and a mass murderer. Clearly, I'm not that. But one aspect of his personality was that he felt like he didn't have any genuine ability to show genuine emotion. And he'd be in a social situation and he's like, oh, I'm expected to be this. So that's what he would do. And to a large degree, that was the easiest way I could find to describe how I would feel quite often. Is like, oh, I'm in this situation, I should be happy, or I should be this or this sort of person. And you would, I would mold myself to be whatever everyone expected me to be at that time. And when I look back now, that's like a large chunk of my life that I lived that way. And that's tiring for a start, and it's exhausting, and you kind of get very lost in that process. And you can then turn to things like food, alcohol, whatever, drugs, to try and make yourself feel something or maybe not feel anything. And to a large degree, that's what I attribute now on reflection and doing work and looking back, is that contribute to a lot of my eating issues, is that gave me comfort. Like I was in control of something where I felt like largely I wasn't in control of anything. And it's a really tricky space. But this week, what got me thinking about I'm not broken, is I was listening to the new Melissa Etheridge, Tell Me You're Gay Without Telling Me You're Gay, album that's just been released. And she did a documentary where she did a concert and a series of visits to a women's prison in the US. And on this album, she wrote this song for those women, but I think it applies to, women everywhere. And the chorus is, I'm not gonna traumatize you with my singing, but it's, I'm a burning woman, I'm not broken, I'm enough. Yes, I fuck things up, but I can break that chain. And it's really powerful. Trust me, when you watch Melissa perform it or listen to it. The album is called I'm Not Broken. And that's the name of the documentary. It's on Paramount Plus. So if you've got one of the streaming services, go check it out. But that song kind of really hit a nerve. And, it is about not being broken and not considering, it doesn't matter what you've done in your past, any mistakes you've made, or the journey. It doesn't make you broken. It doesn't make you defective. It doesn't make you less. And you're also not defined by that, because we have opportunities every single day to make today better than yesterday. So regardless what we did yesterday, we can repair that, make amends for that, or just start on a better foot. Like, you can't, if you drop a plate on the floor and it smashes, you can't necessarily put that back together perfectly, but you can attempt to repair it. And, that's the same with a lot of our situations in life. You can't undo the things that we might have done. Like, do I wish I'd done things differently in my life? Absolutely. But we can't change that. But what we can do is set ourselves on a course to understand that, we can make the next minute, the next hour, the next day better. And I mean, all we can control now is the present, where we are right this second, and then, the future, because decisions we make now will impact the future. But we can't undo anything we did. And I remember I was talking to my wife about it, because we were having a conversation going, I wish that we had got to this point earlier. And then, if I hadn't been previously married, I could have avoided a lot of hurt and trauma to other people. I could have avoided a lot of stress to myself, and we would have had much longer of our life left to spend together, clearly. But when we dug into that, it was, everything that I've done in my life, good, bad, indifferent, right, wrong, whatever, has actually led me to the point I'm at today. So had I met her 20 years ago, 10 years ago, 100% not, we would not have the successful relationship that we do now, because I was not capable of it. I hadn't learned all the lessons I needed to learn. I hadn't come to all the realizations that I could come to. And it probably wouldn't have worked for either of us. So whilst we not regret, but sort of wish that, our lives had been this good earlier, not that our lives were horrible, but what we're living now is our, an authentic life. We had to learn all those lessons. We had to go through those experiences to understand what we now have. And I was talking to my mentor the other week, and it's like, he's like, you have landed in a very good place. You changed your life, flipped it 180, but then you had basically a soft landing, and, you hit the jackpot straight away. And you didn't have to go through some of the stuff that people go through in regards to, traumatic dating and trying to find your identity, and then also find, a partner or someone that identifies with that. I've got some weird light strobing thing, but we'll go with this. I'm testing a new light, so we'll see. As you can see, it's very real. It's not manufactured, this podcast. It's just me sitting and talking. But for us to talk about, for me to have that sort of graceful landing, I didn't have to find my identity, figure out who I was, then figure out, would somebody even like me? It was definitely a benefit, because I think had I not had that, I would have stayed where I was. And whilst that wasn't toxic or dangerous or anything, and I'm blessed, it still wasn't me living. I was existing, and I feel that very strongly now. And that's not doing anyone a service, nobody. But along the way, though, I kind of thought about it, but I disagreed with him, because I did have to go through that process, but I didn't or couldn't do it publicly. I still had to go through, who I was for the 46 and a half years of my life, before I came out. I went through that identity struggle and tried to find where I fit. And when you're constantly feeling broken, it's really hard to go where I fit, because you change and mold yourself, as I said at the start, to try and fit in and to be accepted, and just to be beige, which I guess is a complete antithesis of, living underneath a rainbow flag essentially now, is you want to be beige, you want to fit in, don't pop your head up out of the gopher hole kind of thing. You don't want to be different. You know, it's easier if I fit in, and it's just easier if I go along with what I'm supposed to be or should do. So, as I said in the first episode, that's where I went down that path of, well, this is what's expected. It doesn't matter what I think. And even though I wasn't consciously aware of what I was thinking, I was like, this is what you do. And I desperately wanted all the things that everyone said I wouldn't have. So I pursued those. I, found a partner, got married, did the things, got the house, did the things. And these are all the milestones you're supposed to tick off, but it just didn't leave me feeling the way that I thought it would. And, from a young age, I had, everyone has a vision for what their life is going to be like. Oh, I'll be married by 25 and I'll have the white picket fence and the 2.3 kids and all that sort of stuff. And when life doesn't go to that, fill that picture that you have in your head of what it should be, it's a really conflicting space. Like, it's shitty at times because you're like, and there's a quote that I talk to clients about all the time, is about like, comparison is the thief of joy. And it absolutely is. Like, if you compare where you are with where you either see somebody else is or think you should be, then it's just you're on a mission to nowhere, because you just can't dig out of that, because then it takes away any joy you have from the situation you're in and your environment. And there's always lots to be thankful for and grateful for, no matter what the situation is that we happen to find ourselves in. And a lot of that, like, when you've got to dig through that identity stuff and always questioning about, why don't I fit? Why don't I feel the same as everybody else? Why don't I have the same as everybody else? And knowing that it just didn't fit, it's hard, man. It's like fucking hard work. And it's confusing, and it leads to, low self-esteem, poor body image issues, just, a whole raft of things that just make you feel like a shitty human that's not, overly valued. And then, layer into that some of the complexities that I had with like family relationships, like with my mother, etc. Like, nothing. Like, I could come home with a Nobel Peace Prize, and that's not going to cut the mustard. That's never going to be good enough. There's always something that's a little bit of a backhanded compliment or a dig. And, it's not the worst parental experience that anyone has ever gone through. And I'm absolutely not wanting to diminish anyone else's, but, this is my story about my journey, I guess. And that is something that impacted, because you're like, it didn't matter what I did. It just didn't quite work. And even, as I said, I built a CrossFit affiliate, subconsciously is what I wanted, is to be validated as like, this matters, to be important to people, to matter to people, to be seen and heard and included. And as I said last week, like, that didn't quite work, because I was the owner, I'm the boss. So I was always just on the outside, like, people are going to organize fun things to do, but it's like, I wasn't necessarily included, even though that's what I wanted more than anything. And that's kind of subconsciously, which I didn't realize for a long time, as to why I went down that path. Like, yes, I wanted to open a gym because I wanted to help people and I wanted people to not feel the way that I had, but I was coming at it from a place of exercise and training and weight and image issues and stuff like that, and not feeling comfortable in a regular gym setting, and knowing what CrossFit had untapped in me in regards to, what I enjoyed doing and what I was good at and how I could be equal to everybody else. But really, when I unpack it now, like 2 years out of the gym, is like, I built that so that I had somewhere to belong to. Like, I didn't have to go somewhere else and ask to belong, or like fight to be included. Like, this was my thing. I was always going to be included. But it's a very different aspect when you're just one of the crew to when you're the boss. And like, I loved that time of my life and loved the relationships I had and the friendships, but it's interesting now looking retrospectively is how much work I put into maintaining those and keeping those. And even now today, like I do a lot of work to maintain some of those relationships that I had because they matter to me. But then you go, okay, well, things aren't coming back in reverse. So I'm the one doing all the work. And it's as you know, as a kid that was always like excluded and left out and bullied at school and all that sort of stuff, and then trying to have identity issues, it's a really hard space to be in because you're like, you want the big dynamic circle and you want it to all be okay, but then you also kind of pull away from that to a degree. So because you're like, well, if they see who I really am, they're not going to like me. And, all of the people who are close to me from that time, know very much who I am now. Some of them knew before, I'd told them. But it's still a really challenging space for me, and digging into some of that stuff as to why has helped me understand, why I do what I do, and the way that I can interact with the world and view the world. But it still makes it very hard to manage like external relationships, for one of friendships, circles, even professionally at times. It's an absolute challenge, and it's all come back to that question of identity and that feeling broken. So I know on a conscious level that I'm not broken. Like there's nothing wrong with me. I'm perfectly normal functioning, you know 49-and-a-half-year-old woman who has achieved a lot and whose experiences add value to the world and to those who care about me. But it's really hard to get that on that subconscious level, and that's something I've spent a lot of time working through. My wife is a counselor, so there's a lot of jokes about two women who wind up together, and like all women do, we don't argue, we just like to talk. We can multiply that by a million when you are married to a counselor. And I will often joke that she's therapizing me. And like I went through a really large portion of my life where like I didn't like there was no emotion shown. Like if I cried, I cried in the shower. It wasn't anything that. And I swear to God, in the last 3.5 years, I've probably cried more than I have in my entire adult life, 4 years nearly. And yeah, I've cried more than I have in my entire life, quite probably. But it's like there's a whole lifetime of stuff now that can be unpacked because now I am authentically who I am meant to be. So with that comes you must feel the feelings, which is, difficult because that's not something that I've ever been able to do, and not necessarily encouraged because that's not okay. Like, I think we've all heard when we're kids, like, what are you crying for? I'll give you something to cry about. Or you're just overreacting, or anything like that. And that's a natural part of the process that comes with unpacking the layers and going, oh, and you come across things that have cut deep, and as you realize what you do, and that's been the process I've been through in the last few years, is like, where do I fit and how do I fit and what does that look like? And that's been, you know, a struggle, and that's what's led me up to this point of starting this podcast. And even if nobody listened to it, it's great. Like, I didn't create it for people to necessarily listen to, but it was a way for me to vocalize a story and a journey. And if anyone listened to it and got something from it, great. If nobody listened to it, then that's just as good as well, because I've managed to process things and work through some stuff to get clarity in my own head. And I was thinking a lot about, to circle back to the I'm not broken thing, that song is quite powerful in that, we've got ambitions and goals and dreams and but then we always pull ourselves up because we're like, we either don't think we're worth it, we don't think we're enough, we don't think we're good enough, or we don't think we fit. Like, Um, and it's just a weird space. And I don't know that this is very clear to anyone. Um, but it's about part of the journey that I've been through is going, where do I fit in the space? And even how, to a degree, how do I fit in my own skin, like in who I am? Like when you get up in the morning and you look in the mirror, like who's the person looking back at you? And, for many years, I defined myself about by what I did. And, the first thing people I'd say, "Hi, I'm Lisa. I'm a coach. I'm a gym owner. I'm a XYZ." And that's because I thought if I can define myself with that, and all of this is subconscious, it wasn't, planned. I didn't sit down and write this out. But if I could define myself by those things, then nobody would look at all the other things that I wasn't putting out there that, I didn't fit. I felt like a fraud, imposter syndrome was rife. And rightly so, because I was actually an imposter in my own life because I wasn't living an authentic life, which is a really, again, it seems I've said it like 1,000 times today, it's a shitty spot to be in, particularly when you're not out the other side, but further through and you look back at it and you're like, what the fuck was I doing? But you do the best you can with what you know at the time. So, and that's where that concept of is like, I can't undo any of that. And maybe had I been able to be who I was meant to be then, I might have been a better coach. I know I would have been. I would have been a better friend and a better person all round. And I'm not saying I was a bad person, but I was just a lesser version of me, um, which maybe would have made the business, more successful and drawn people to me because I was able to be authentic, which, that's the being the struggle like now is like developing that authenticity and understanding that people will like me for me as I am and as I present now, not because I have a transactional relationship with them, or they're obligated to work with me, or they're obligated to interact with me. Now it's because of who, not what I can do for them. And many of my relationships in the past, professionally and personally, have been very or felt very transactional. And even if it wasn't conscious on either side, excuse me, that's what it's been. When I can look back and reflect. So yeah, it's still very much a work in progress as to getting to the point of feeling like I'm uh, worthwhile and not broken. And it's very much that. I remember about when was it? 2012. I got a tattoo on my arm in Chinese writing that says "I am enough," and I thought that's going to be it. That's going to remind me all the time. It it's right there on my arm, but it didn't actually help me believe it every time I looked at the thing. Um, so it's a process. It's a process, and even like I felt when I put the first episode out, I was like, ooh, I had that vulnerability hangover bad. Where I was like, oh, this just feels icky. It feels hard. I feel very exposed. A good friend said to me, how does it feel, putting that out there? And I was like, scary as fuck. And he was like, well, why is it scary? And I was like, well, it's very exposing. It's very um, challenging. And conversations with my wife and, a conversation that he also had with me was, that the sooner you get it all out, I'm just reading a text. Sooner you get it all out, the sooner you'll benefit from the wisdom lessons and the stories. The longer you hold it in, the more you suffer isolation without any benefit from that pain you went through. And my wife and I have had a lot of big conversations about, what I need to unpack, what I need to talk about, and what is beneficial. And, you know, I understand that, like, I went through that whole 46 and a half years of life, and there's a lot of stuff in that if I don't own the story, then, you know, I've been through all that for nothing, because then there's no benefit to me, no benefit to anyone else to share that. But also then I'm stuck, as in, what's oversharing? What are some things that I, want to respect other people's privacy, want to, respect other people's space. And it's not for me to tell their story. And that's a powerful thing, is that it's, I'm not, that's not my job. My job is to tell my story from my perspective. And I don't want to cause carnage to other people on the way through, just because, I choose to tell my story. That's not something that they're uh, able or wanting or even interested in doing. It is their story. So it kind of, I feel like I'm in that, like, sticky middle part, and I don't really know how to navigate that, to be honest. So I'm just going to roll with these episodes and just talk from my perspective, because I do agree with, my wife, and that there's value in digging through some of that stuff, whether that's with therapy or stuff that I choose to share on this. Because there has to be some benefit. It's almost, if you think about climbing Mount Everest, and you go through those 4 weeks where you go base camp, camp 1, back to base camp, and you have to go through the perilous sections of the mountain, and then you might get to base camp 3, and then you just go, yeah, look, I think I'm done now, and go back down. And you haven't got any benefit from all that suffering you went through, because you're done. You never tick the final, end goal. And maybe that's too broad of a sort of an analogy, but there has to be some, payoff for the work that I've done, and that's being able to be authentic with my story. And then it doesn't control me, because at the moment I feel like, even now, like, that this went out there, I didn't hard promote it. I didn't, like, plaster everywhere. I did a very soft, boop, just put this out there and create a little Instagram, and didn't just left it. And I put it in one group that I was in for women who are coming out later in life. That's all I did. And so, to a degree, the story still does control me, because I haven't taken full ownership, and I haven't, run with it. But this is at a pace that, I haven't created this to go viral and be the Oprah Winfrey of, people who are coming out later in life. That's, not my jam. I want to have real and authentic conversations, because I love that, and I want to create a space where other people could have the same conversations, but also just so I can dip the toes into owning who I am and my story and my journey so far. And just in this last week, like, watching that documentary, listening to the CD, and some of the stuff that she was saying about, you aren't defined by the life you've lived up to this point, and you're not defined by any mistakes. Like, you can take steps to change that trajectory and correct that, like, now, essentially. And that, I may have fucked things up, but I can absolutely break that chain, what holds me down. So I feel like that's what this is about, and I'm trying to navigate that and be open and transparent and vulnerable, as difficult as that is. And that is really hard. And I probably, over the last 3.5 years, I've probably been the most open and vulnerable that I've ever been. Like, I've shared things with people that I've never shared before. And that's because, like, I have a safe space at home, and I'm incredibly blessed. Like, I don't take for granted that this journey is not as smooth for other people, walking the same path. I see posts all the time in various groups about how hard it is for people, and they've had whole communities of friends turn against them, and families, and that's hard and that's awful. And I don't take for granted that I had a softer landing, for sure. But again, in my space, like, because I can only talk about my story, like, there's still been the things that made that. Like, I don't know how I would have navigated it if it was harder or I had to navigate it on my own. Because that would be really, really tricky. And I know my tendencies would have been just to hide away and just stay, because that was easier. Like, even when I sort of got to the point where I felt like I knew who I was and I knew, like, that I was gay, I could never foresee myself leaving that situation, that, like, not situation, that's a shitty word to use. Leaving, the marriage I was in, and like the stability and security that I had, because that was as scary as fuck. And if I didn't have a supportive environment to go to, then, then I probably wouldn't have gone. Like, it would have been 100,000% too hard. And I would have just continued on with my life until one day, I died and it just petered out. And that's what I would have done. I would have kept flogging myself at the gym, in, running the business and trying to find that identity and find something that fit, even though, it's like walking around in a pair of shoes of the wrong size, but you really like the shoes. But you can feel your toes are mushed up and there's blisters, but you just ignore it and you just keep doing the thing. That's kind of the best way that I can think to describe it. And I would have continued on with that. So, I don't take for granted that I did have an amazing safe space to be where I could just, like, work through this stuff as well. But again, it's still been a hard space for me to navigate. And even now, it's like, well, this is all great. This is all amazing. Is it all going to go away? Like, is one day my wife going to wake up and go, well, actually, no, like, you're not the person I want to be with anymore? Like, is she going to, as the layers unpack, is she going to go, nah, you are defective, you are broken, I'm out. Now, I know on every level that that's not the case, but that's still a subconscious fear, and that's part of my, one of my, not habits, not behaviors, can't think of the right word, of where I will always try and be valuable and useful in my relationships, whether it be with friends or, at home. It's like, well, if I'm useful and I'm valuable and I can contribute, then people are going to keep me around. And that gets back to that old, transactional relationships that I used to have. Like, well, I'll do all these things and then you want to keep me around because I'm useful. And I know that I do that, and I know that I think like that at times, and I don't need to anymore. Like, I'm at a point in my life where I'm like, well, if you don't like me, that's your cool, that's your story, and on we go. Like, my circle is a lot smaller. I used to think that, oh yeah, I have a big circle and I'm popular, because as a kid, never popular at school. And now it's like, that's the last thing I want. I don't want to be wildly, popular, but the people that matter to me, it still matters to me that they see my value, even though I don't feel like that they might do at times, because that's just me. That's on me. That's one of my thought processes. So yeah, so that's kind of the thinking that's been rumbling around this brain of mine this week, about values and, being broken. And that's been a thing that I guess I've thought of a lot the week since I've been listening to that song, but also the preamble to it and watching that documentary, and then just reflecting on that it's understanding that's how I felt for a long time. And then, when you've lived your life a certain way, nearly 50 years, it's really hard to unlive that and to undo some of those inbuilt beliefs, but it can be done. It just takes a lot of work. And I'm grateful for the people that surround me that challenge me to do that work, and that help me sort of push through that space. But understanding, like, I can contribute as just Lisa. I don't have to be, Coach Lisa. I don't have to be anything but Lisa. Which, for the first time probably in my entire life, I've never felt that I could just be me and that was enough, without feeling like I had to do everything and help everyone and go above and beyond. And I still do that in some of my various projects and stuff. And I think one of the big things to helping me get to that point is, like, my wife's extended family, her aunties, just accepted me, openly from day one. And I've never had, a close family group. Like, I speak to a second cousin, my mother, and an uncle, a great uncle. An uncle. Is he my uncle? Yes, he's my uncle. That's it, essentially. And even then, it's not like every day. It's not like every week. It's not even like, sometimes it might be months. And it's not that relationship where, anyone says, I love you, or there's no affection. There's none of that. And because that's been our family dynamic. But these women have been amazing. Like, they have just welcomed me as if I'm been in the family for 50 years and just love me for me. And because I'm good to Sharon and I love Sharon and they see how happy we are together, they embrace that. And they're like, well, we love you to bits and we love you for you. And to have that, like, extended network do that, and you're like, oh, and I didn't have to do anything but be who I was, like, just be me. And when we connected over dinners or lunches or trips away, whatever, but that's it. They love me instantly because they saw my relationship with Sharon, or Sharon's relationship with me, and how happy she was, and that was enough for them. And it took me a little bit to go, what? But to have that then helps reinforce that it's okay just to be me. I don't have to be anything. They don't know me as anything. They didn't know me as a CrossFit coach or a gym owner or a podcast person or any of the million things I've done in my life. They just knew me as Sharon's partner, who was making Sharon incredibly happy, and that was enough for them, which was mind-blowing to me. And it took me a little bit to like, allow myself to absorb that. But now it's like, they're my people. Like, I feel like they're my family, and they are for all intents and purposes. So that's been a light, I guess, that shone on that area, that is like, I can just be me and that's fine. I don't need to be defined by a what. I can just be defined by who I am in that moment, and that's okay. And that's probably one of the most powerful gifts that they've given me. Like, Sharon's given me that from day one, but these guys, like, these, powerful, like, strong, like, women who've, worked hard their entire lives, and they've raised families, and they're, outstanding humans. Like, and yeah, they just give that love just so freely. That's what they do. So I'm blessed to have that, but I need to take those lessons on from that and understand that I don't need to be anything in the wider world with a asterisk before it, or I can do this for you, or I can do that. I don't do anything for them. I turn up when we go to visit, and I'm a good human, like I like to be, and I treat Sharon well, and they know that, and that's all I have to do. And that's awesome for them, and they love that. So that seems like a good note to put a pin in this one, I guess. Again, I did have to watch last episode because Sharon hadn't seen it yet, and I said, oh, we'll just put it on YouTube. I don't really like listening to my own voice, and I certainly don't like watching my own face on the big TV, but we did it. but I'm never sure if what I say makes any sense. So I hope you got something out of it. If you thought it was just ramble, that's cool too. But please, love the feedback. Reach out if you have any thing you want to, chat about. I'm open to having guests on the podcast, as I said, like sharing other people's, stories of, love and identity and pride in who we are and what we're about. Definitely reach out for that. But I look forward to talking again next week. I'll see you on the flip